It was supposed to be the proudest day of his life, his son's college graduation. Marcus, a decorated black Marine who had served his country for over 2 decades, took his seat early, dressed in his best suit, ready to watch his boy walk the stage. But before the ceremony could begin, 2 campus security guards walked up to him. Their eyes said it all before their mouths did. They told him he didn't belong there. They told him to leave. What happened next silenced the entire college and made everyone rethink what they thought they knew about respect. Marcus Daniels had lived a life of discipline, sacrifice, and honor. For over 20 years, the Marine Corps had been his home. He'd seen war zones, stood guard in foreign lands, and rescued civilians in danger. But today wasn't about his military record. Today was about his son, Jordan. Jordan had worked tirelessly to earn a scholarship to a top university. 4 years of late nights, exams, and projects had finally paid off. He wasn't just graduating, he was graduating with honors. For Marcus, this day meant more than words could explain. The college's main auditorium was filled with proud families. Banners hung from the ceiling, the stage glowed under bright lights, and the smell of fresh flowers filled the air. Marcus found his seat near the center, straightening his tie. He didn't wear his military uniform today, just a neat pressed suit. He wanted all the attention to be on his son, not on himself. As he waited, Marcus noticed 2 campus security guards by the side entrance. They were whispering and glancing at him. At first, he thought maybe they were talking about seating arrangements. But then, they began walking toward him with a slow, deliberate pace. Marcus kept calm. Years in the military had taught him never to overreact. But something in their expressions, a mix of authority and suspicion, told him this wasn't going to be a friendly conversation. What they were about to say would not only humiliate Marcus in front of hundreds of people, but would also spark an event that no one in that college would ever forget. The 2 guards stopped directly in front of Marcus, blocking the aisle as the chatter of families and graduates filled the auditorium. One of them leaned slightly forward and, without lowering his voice enough, said, "Sir, we've had a report that you're not supposed to be here." Marcus blinked, unsure if he'd heard correctly. Not supposed to be here? He reached for the printed invitation in his jacket pocket, the one Jordan had personally mailed him weeks ago. But before he could pull it out, the other guard continued, "You'll need to step outside with us. Now." Heads began to turn. Whispers started to ripple through the crowd. Marcus felt the weight of every pair of eyes on him. He had faced hostile stares in combat zones before, but here, in a place meant for celebration, it cut deeper. He calmly asked why they were removing him. Their answer was vague, something about keeping the event secure and making sure attendees belong. But Marcus noticed something. They hadn't asked for anyone else's ID. Around him, families of all colors chatted and laughed freely. No one else was being questioned. As he stood up, he could see Jordan's graduating class starting to file in from the far side of the auditorium. His son's eyes met his for a split second. The confusion on Jordan's face was unmistakable. Marcus forced a reassuring nod, hiding the storm brewing inside him. The guards escorted him into the hallway, where the noise of the ceremony dulled to a faint echo. One of them asked again for proof he was supposed to be there. Marcus handed over the invitation, pointing to his name clearly printed on the guest list. They glanced at it but didn't apologize. Instead, they asked if he really was the father. That sentence hit Marcus harder than he expected. It wasn't about security anymore. It was about something else. Something he'd faced his whole life, but hoped his son wouldn't have to see so openly. Inside the hall, the ceremony had started. Marcus could hear the speeches and applause muffled through the walls. Every passing second meant he was missing a part of his son's big day. He thought of all the times he had been away on deployments, all the milestones he'd missed, birthdays, school events, first football games. This was supposed to be different. The guards seemed in no rush to let him back in. Marcus stood there in silence, his jaw tight, refusing to let them see how much this hurt. And then, footsteps approached from the far end of the hallway, heavy, synchronized, and purposeful. 6 tall men in dress uniforms rounded the corner. They weren't campus security. They weren't teachers. They were Navy SEALs. The air in the hallway shifted instantly. The guards straightened up, suddenly unsure. Marcus didn't move. He knew exactly who these men were, and why their arrival was about to change everything. The SEALs stopped just a few feet from Marcus and the guards. Their presence was impossible to ignore. Broad shoulders, pressed uniforms, rows of medals catching, the hallway lights. Every step they had taken carried the weight of authority and respect that no one dared challenge. The one in front, a tall man with piercing blue eyes, glanced briefly at Marcus before fixing his gaze on the 2 guards. His voice was calm, but it had the kind of command that made people stand at attention without thinking. "Why?" he asked slowly. "Is this man standing out here instead of watching his son graduate?" The guards exchanged nervous looks. One mumbled something about a security concern, but the words sounded weak and hollow in the still air. The SEAL's eyes narrowed. "Security concern? Do you know who this is?" His voice didn't rise, yet the question hung heavy, as if daring them to answer wrong. Before the guards could respond, the SEAL took a step closer to Marcus and spoke loud enough for the entire hallway, and anyone peeking from the auditorium doors, to hear. "This is Gunnery Sergeant Marcus Cole, 2 decades of service, 3 tours in Afghanistan, bronze, star for heroism. The man you're keeping out is the reason you get to stand here and wear that uniform without fear." The other SEALs stood like a living wall behind their leader, each one radiating silent support. The guards' faces drained of color. Without another word, the lead SEAL turned toward the auditorium doors and opened them wide. The sudden burst of light and applause from inside spilled into the hallway. "Sergeant Cole," he said, motioning inside, "your seat is waiting, and so is your son." As Marcus walked past the guards, he didn't look at them. He didn't need to. The silence in their throats said everything. The SEALs followed behind him, their presence commanding the attention of every person in the room. When Marcus entered, heads turned. Conversations stopped. And for the first time since the ceremony began, the audience was silent, not out of fear, but out of deep, sudden respect. Marcus stepped into the auditorium as the principal was finishing a speech about honor, sacrifice, and perseverance. But now, all eyes were on him. Parents whispered, students straightened in their seats, and his son, Jason, froze on stage. For a split second, Jason's eyes widened in shock. Then they softened with pride. The boy who had spent years telling his friends about his father's service was now watching the entire school see it for themselves. Marcus found his seat in the front row. The lead SEAL gave a small nod toward Jason, and the young man's smile grew wider. When the principal called Jason's name, the applause was louder than any other that day. But as Jason walked across the stage to receive his diploma, he didn't go straight back to his seat. Instead, he stepped down into the aisle and handed the diploma to his father. Marcus shook his head gently, refusing, but Jason pressed it back into his hands and whispered something only the 2 of them could hear. The crowd didn't need the words. They understood. The SEALs stood quietly in the back, their job done, but their presence still powerful. The 2 guards who had tried to force Marcus out remained near the doors, eyes fixed on the floor. They had been silenced without a shout, without a fight, only the undeniable truth of a man's worth. As the ceremony ended, parents approached Marcus, thanking him for his service. Some shook his hand. Others simply placed a hand on his shoulder. Jason's classmates came up to him too, no longer seeing just a father in uniform, but a hero whose story they would remember long after graduation day. Outside, as the sunlight poured over the campus, Marcus stood with his son, diploma still in hand. "You earned this," he told Jason, but Jason shook his head. "We earned this," he replied. The day had begun with humiliation. It ended with honor, not because Marcus demanded respect, but because respect had arrived, uninvited, in the form of 6 men who knew the value of standing up for what's right. And maybe that's the real question for everyone watching. When? You see injustice, will you stand silent, or will you stand up?